So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to another series of intimate conversations with myself, Mandy Horton. And if you feel compelled to subscribe to my YouTube channel, that would be wonderful. And today we're going to be chatting with Gina Noetica. So, welcome, Gina, and thank you for saying yes and coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mandy, and hi, everyone.
No. And I always love these chats because there's some deep dives, and what you're doing with the water and things, it'll be beautiful to have that chat with you. So I'll just introduce you to those who may not have heard of you or know you at all. So Gina is a professional energy alchemist and intuitive, a keynote speaker, an international award-winning environmentalist, retreat leader, and the founder of the Center of Expanding Consciousness. She has had a varied career working with everyone from celebrities, top athletes and musicians, corporates, children, and everyone in between in both clinical and esoteric settings. Gina also home educates her two starseed children, and she believes the most powerful way to restore harmony and balance on earth is through expanding consciousness to the point where each person realizes their own limitless human potential and interconnectedness with all life forms. She is passionate about catalyzing global and personal transformation through the liquid intelligence, light, and consciousness of water. And through here, Gina is also a HeartMath breathwork meditation HeartMath practitioner, certified Cacao Facilitator, and developed her own style of energy healing called Quantum Energy Alchemy, and is currently learning how to see blindfolded and teach the skill to others. Very cool. And I've missed out a huge amount of your skills and
That's
all
good. It
your
gets boring. Yeah.
studies and things. There's a lot there. You've done a lot, Gina. Beautiful
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this
Yeah.
world is amazing, right? There's so much to learn. So I feel like I'm forever a student, always just, I'm so curious about everything that this planet has to offer. So sometimes I have to tell myself, stop studying, but there's just so much to learn. It's a bit hard.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so like that. And I think we as seekers, we came in as seekers and we're really, there is so much to learn. I love it too.
Yeah,
So
same.
one of the first questions I do ask, and it just gets the ball rolling because we just have a chat, is were you a consciously aware child?
I believe I was, yeah, but within stages, I feel like when people talk about they had an awakening or a time of awakening, I don't really feel like I had that as such. I feel like I was just born kind of knowing quite a lot of things that we already talk about in the spiritual and the consciousness industries. So
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I had a sharp awakening, but there were certainly times of confusion or still trying to find my way in the world. Like, how do I bring through the knowings that I have and how do I apply them?
Mhm.
There was still that aspect to it. But
Mhm.
I never felt like I had an awakening to it. I just felt like I always knew things, which sounds really arrogant, but it's a really Aquarius thing to say too. I know, I know, I know, I know all the time. I was one of those annoying kids that either were asking why all the time or just saying, I know. Like, but it's just kind
Yeah.
of one of those things. I I realized that I have, only sort of through talking to others and as growing up that not everyone necessarily has it, that I always had a very strong conversation always going on in my head with a higher
Mhm.
intelligence. I never felt alone because of this. I always felt connected and I always had information, um, which guided me and made me a little quirky, I guess, as a kid. Not that I saw myself that way, but when I would say things like I know, it's because I have this conversation going on in my head really clearly with other beings who tell me information. And so for that reason too, like schooling was a little bit different for me. I sometimes I would really challenge my teachers about saying, well, that's not right, or things like that.
Right, yes. Yeah. Mm. And what about your parents? Like, were they, you know, how did that impact with you being that child?
Have that
I
child,
know.
yeah.
That I know child. How did
Yeah.
that impact around with people in your family and that? Because that would have probably pushed a few buttons, would it?
Yeah, it did. Interesting. I've got two children, and I see a lot of myself in my children, and a lot of what probably pushed my parents' buttons is exactly how my daughter pushes my buttons, and I empathize with it because I'm like, damn, that's exactly what I used to do. So I understand it,
Yeah.
now, as a parent. I had an unusual upbringing. This is what other people tell me, anyways, a bit unusual, and other people will label it as a bit dysfunctional. Not that I saw it that way, but I think a lot of people that have work in the spiritual field and the consciousness field have quite challenging upbringings. But that's how we learn our lessons, right? That's how we discover
Mm,
this planet, and we discover how other humans work, and it's how we
yeah.
discover the systems, and how to change the systems if it's not working. So, and I say this too because when I talk about my upbringing, something that can actually quite disappoint me is when people go, oh, and do a bit of the pity card. And I'm like, oh God, yeah, don't do that. I'm like,
No. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, don't like, so all I'm saying is that if I talk about my childhood and I'm an open book, I'll talk about any aspect, but keep in mind that observer effect, as you observe my story or listen to it, I don't want it tainted with kind of like, oh God, that's a bit, oh, poor you kind of thing. It's not.
Not your story as such anymore, eh? Like,
That's right,
yeah.
yeah. And so my parent, like, it's interesting. I noticed that you interviewed Tabash and Blair Styra a little
Yeah.
while ago. And about 5 years ago, I had a reading with Blair Styra. Tabash came through, and he
Yeah.
used this word to describe my parents, which I thought was quite spot on. But it can sound a little cold if you don't see it from the consciousness lens. So he
Yeah.
said, he said, "Oh, your parents are superfluous to you." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's a really good word."
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we mean, or what I mean, what he meant by this was that I just needed to get on this planet. It
I,
didn't really
yeah.
matter to me how it
Mm,
happened.
yeah.
So, but in saying that, I love my parents, have a really deep love for them. And if I'm really honest, my children are the same. They just came through because they needed to be here. I'm actually quite superfluous to them too. So even though it can sound cold, it's all with purpose and intention.
Well,
Yeah,
exactly. And we're just the vessel for that. For them to arrive, our parents were the vessel for us to arrive. But it is a guardianship, isn't it? It's not an ownership. And I think that's sort of changing a bit too, really. More and more people are realizing that with their children, that
yeah,
it's not actually an ownership, that they're just there to be those guardian for them until their time where they're their own. And
exactly.
and I know I was very much I think I felt like that myself too around my parents. Like, I totally loved them. We had a great family, but that there was not a lot that I needed from them as such, you know? Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? When you think into it, it is a bit funny. But I
It is.
just I was like you knew. And yeah. And for me, school was really a pressure in respect to, I didn't feel like I needed to be there. I didn't need to be there and learn that stuff that they were trying to teach us. It had
Mm,
no meaning to me. And
totally.
I just saw the hypocrisy of those adults telling us things we shouldn't be doing when they were quite clearly doing everything they were telling us not to. You
Yeah,
know, in many ways, it was like, this is all a bit weird. But yeah, I
yeah,
couldn't wait to get out of there.
yeah. And that's just the classic quote of my childhood. I couldn't wait till that chapter was over. I remember knowing that, okay, I had to wait till I was 17 till I finished school. That was, I was a year younger, through my schooling. So 17, I was like, God, that's the end of the chapter. Thank goodness that's done. It was like such
Yeah.
a drag. But in saying that, I guess also in answering your question around my parents and in schooling as well, like my mum and dad, they were interesting. Like my dad was a musician, and a teacher. My mum was an artist and a teacher, but my mother developed multiple sclerosis before she became pregnant with me. So
Okay.
all of my life she was unwell. She had a disability,
Mm.
and multiple sclerosis really shaped us. But as soon as I was born, my father left. He didn't really want children, and that's okay. That just was his path. And he also found it very challenging being with a wife that had multiple sclerosis. Um,
Yeah.
he didn't a lot of not I'm not going to characterize and say a lot of men, but it is a bit more difficult for men to be a carer than women. We tend to step into
Yes.
the nurturing role a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was raised, as an only child to a single mother, and she was from a Catholic family. So back in the late 70s, when I was born, it was still slightly ostracized, like being a Catholic woman and divorcing, and all
Oh,
that kind of stuff. So
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so and because she had a disability, multiple sclerosis, which not only changed her physicality, meaning that she progressed into a wheelchair, but also her mind, because the scar tissue for her, it went beyond the myelin sheath in the spine, it went into the brain as well. So
Right.
that progression meant that she sort of lost friendships because her moods were changing, so she'd lose all the support around her friendships and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So that was really insightful for me though, because when I became the carer, like I was the one that managed the household and things.
Yeah.
But also it was really interesting seeing the healthcare system from an early age. I mean, I could clearly see that there were so many faults. She would take a medication and her teeth would fall out. I mean, I'd be like, oh God, there's something seriously
Yeah.
wrong. People were really guinea pigs. And that's part of what that experience with her taught me, was to have an insight into the healthcare system, and also not to take my own health and my own vessel that I have for granted.
Yeah.
I'm quite a clean living person, but that's with intention. It's because I've seen the other side, and it's gross. It's just,
It is. It
yeah,
is. It's a harsh reality too. And I know when I was, so many different parts of myself had all come forward, and it was like, what am I doing with all of this, when I could? And I'd bartered with my parents that I was 15, I'm getting out of here, out of school. And they said, no, no, you can't. I said, yes, I am. I am. I'm not 15's it. As soon as I turn 15, I'm out. I'm out of there. And it was a pact. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, then you have to have an apprenticeship. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do anything. I'm not going back for another year. But in that, trying to find how I was going to put it into the world. What am I going to do with all of this, all these gifts that I had? And I remember Spirit saying to me, look into your anger.
mm,
And I thought, what? And when I did, my anger was around people putting the toxic pharmaceutical stuff into their body. And I knew then that's it. That's where my stuff lies. So
yeah,
yeah, then came forward all the cellular stuff, all that sort of mahi. But it's a now we look at it, Gina, and I mean there's a real health crisis going on the planet now,
yeah,
more than ever. And the shortages of those, services too for everyone. They're finding it very hard to get in, and a long wait. And that there is, it's sort of playing into our hands really.
mm. Yeah.
So,
It means that we are given a chance as natural healers, and energy healers, and bringing in those holistic aspects into our health. People are paying
mm,
attention to it because they know they're not getting the service as quickly as they used to, so they start looking for other
yeah,
options, and we are an option, and a lot of the time we work. So or it
exactly.
helps. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I'm loving the time right now for that, just for that on its own. The people that are coming forward now and have found that that's not actually working for them, and so therefore let's try this over there. you know and it's a beautiful thing when they get the bigger picture of it all too, and how it all works, you know like the
Absolutely.
cause behind what's going on and underneath what's going on, and the big moments of aha, right, yes, you know, and it just drops into their body. You can see it working, and right there, you know, they're going to nail it.
Totally.
It's
Yep.
beautiful, eh?
Exactly. Yep. No,
Yeah,
it's a really interesting time to be on this planet, and all these gifts that we get, especially growing up or a little bit perhaps advanced, before the wave. We're going through a wave of a lot of, unhealth, like all the systems are collapsing. The health systems, the governments are changing, all these things. So anyone that's kind of had a little bit of an advantage of seeing these things early feel quite prepared and not stay like we're quite stable and quite grounded and can really anchor down and kind of hold the space for people that are still going through it, which is,
yeah.
it's a real privilege, and it's nice to be able to guide people through it. I feel like I don't get surprised by anything anymore. It's like,
No, me either. And
yeah,
can just sort of disregard something very quickly. It's like, don't have to hang on to that at all. It's like there's no, yeah, it's really, it's a cool time.
it
And
is.
I know a lot of people are in fear and a lot of, worry out there, but it's a very interesting space.
It is.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And I've got to admit, like, one thing I'm really grateful for to, my parents is the amount of freedom I actually had, because they both had, my dad had his own life. He wasn't, really overly involved in my life, like a
yeah.
phone call a couple of times a year. And we're good friends now. Like, we've got a, like good relationship and stuff. Um, and my mum with her illness, that consumed her, just trying to survive.
Yeah.
We grew up in
Oh,
poverty and state housing. I'm one of those kids that, didn't get lunches at school, so I understand that whole system. And it
yeah.
also taught me a lot, from a really young age. I remember being at school and never having lunch or anything like that. And on Fridays, they used to do this thing. Oh, it actually quite disgusted me, but it was the thing that the school did. You'd get a pie and chips, like you take your $2 along or something, have a pie
Yes.
and chips ordered. And I used
Yeah.
to hate meat, like mince and stuff. But anyway, sometimes if there was anything left over, I'd get a meal that way. But it was really interesting because I got taught a lot about racism too. And I know it's like a hot topic, these days, and it's weird, to be a white person who seems privileged, but I actually was raised in poverty, but I observed
Yes.
racism as a child because I was the poor kid in lower socioeconomic environments, always going
Yeah.
to the low decile schools, never having the lunch packed, for years in my bag, always going hungry, never anything in the cupboards, all that kind of stuff. And I used to say, oh, how come I have to walk to school, and it's all the time I had to get myself to school, walk to school, never had lunch. But I would see some other children in similar situations to me, but get help. But that was because they were of Māori or Pacific Islander, and there were systems in place to help them.
Right.
And
Yes.
so as a kid, I was like, oh, how come they get some help? I mean, I'm not saying it was great, but they got some assistance. But then
Mm,
because of my color, I don't, because I don't qualify for anything.
yes.
Oh, okay. So from a young age, I really understood that division in the world too.
Yeah.
And from the more kind of, I guess, I don't know what label to put it, but maybe a more galactic or higher intelligence kind of knowing, I come from a place where all that is long gone, like epochs ago. The whole like division thing around racism and stuff. I mean, to me, that's like, are we
Yes.
still talking about that? Oh my God.
Yes.
It's kind of like, but my childhood opened me up to these things. And even then, as a 5 or 6 year old going, oh, this is so backward. Like, and I remember learning the food pyramid system at school. I think maybe it was introduced at about 6 or 7 years of age when, back in the early 80s, looking at it going, that's wrong. And it has
Mm.
changed, and there's
It's
just this
basically upside down, isn't it? Like
totally,
everything.
yeah,
Turn it
totally,
inside out, and that's going to be the truth.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
God.
all these things, I got exposed to a lot of the systems when I was younger. And so I've kind of been through and explored lots of stuff, from a young
Mm.
age. But my mother not being involved that much because of her illness did allow me a lot of freedom. I had a lot of space, and I realized it was such a gift because, these days I guess I'm labeled as an introvert because I like my own space. But really, what it is that I get so much conversation going on, I guess, with other beings and information that if I don't have my
Mm.
quiet time to have that, I get a little agitated. I just need a bit of quiet space to tune in and listen
Yeah.
to what's really going on in the universe. and get my guidance that way. When I'm in a noisy, like when I was in a noisy classroom growing up as a child, it was a little, I mean, I tolerated it, but it was a bit overwhelming. To me, it
Yeah.
just seemed like a lot of noise, a lot of nonsense, a lot of really stupid systems. And when I was a child, you know, if I speak without my adult filter, you know, everything was just stupid. You know, that was just my language. And
Yeah.
humans are dumb, and that's all I would say. And the interesting thing was, is that all through primary, going right up until I finished school, I was always top of the class academically, right? So, but I never paid attention. And that's what my teachers would always say. Like on my report cards, they would always be like, I don't know how Gina does so well because she's always staring out the window daydreaming. And my nickname at school was Sleepy G because I was always daydreaming. But that's because the information I was getting through my channeling was way more satisfying for me than anything that a teacher was presenting in class. But when it came to exam time, and even like our little daily exams, like in primary school for like, you know, maths and spelling and stuff, I would
Yes.
ace it. I would totally ace it, 10 out of 10 all the time, first one finished. And my teacher would tell me off because everyone would cheat by looking at my answers. Oh, right, you know, like, and when it came to high school exams, I was never studied and I was in the A stream. But the teachers were like, I don't know how you even do so well because you never, like, I never studied. And other kids would never, they'd kick me out of study groups because I'd just sit there and chat and do something else. But the thing was, is that when I sat in an exam, there was a combination of multi-choice and writing, and I would just ask my guides. I'd just be like, what answer? There's 4 answers, which one do I tick? And they'd go, well, actually, they're all wrong. And I'm like, well, that's not going to help me in my exam. Which one do I tick? What's the one then that the teacher is going to mark right? And they'd be like, oh, okay, well, if you want the one that the teacher's going to mark right, it's number B. So I would tick that one. And then they would tell me what to write in the actual, you know, writing part of the exams. And I'd always pass and always get, you know, great results. And it was an interesting thing because religion and history were the 2 subjects I was really like challenged with because the debate would go on so much between me and my guides
Yeah.
in those 2 subjects in particular. I mean, they did in some other subjects like science occasionally and stuff, but religion and religion and history, there was so much conflict. Like my guides were constantly going, that's wrong, that's not right. Well, that's partly right. Well, the message behind it is good, but it's come out wrong. And I'm like, God. And and so it was really challenging. But it was interesting because I'd have what was going on in my head, and then I'd have like the actual presentation of religion and history to me, and that shaped my life later on, and understanding that, you know, like my guides would tell me when I was sitting in class that, oh, this part of the Bible that you're being taught at the moment in class is actually just someone like sitting down and writing a story, telling a metaphor. There's like a
Yeah.
little bit of a good background story to it that's good for humanity to learn, but the actual facts in it is not right. Or maybe 8 out of 10 of the facts are wrong and a
Yes.
couple are right, you know. And I remember like perking my ears up when they would teach about Jesus and his healing with his hands. I'd be like, oh, I want to be like him. Like totally. Like, yeah, I'll do that for career day. I'll be Jesus. And then, but then,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, because my guides would say, well, actually, there was a person called Jesus, and he was actually really remarkable with his hands. And
Yeah.
the healing qualities that came through is anyone can do it, and you can do it, and so can other people. So, you know, that was the message I would hear from my guides. But when I would present that kind of information, it was seen as arrogant, and my religious studies teacher said, no, you can't, no one can be like Jesus, you know, you can't, that's,
Exactly.
you know, it's just was frowned upon. And I was like, why is that frowned upon? We're learnt to like kind of worship him and be like him and be in his image and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, so there's all these things from my childhood that kind of opened my eyes to a whole bunch of stuff. But I think it's kind of like quite a similar story to a lot of awakened people. You know, we see through the systems and we've had to sit through all this and roll our eyes a bit, but
Exactly.
yeah.
I know, and I think the same. I was really blessed too. My parents weren't religious in any way, you know, and for me, this lifetime, that was huge. I felt that to be, I sort of was a bit, I was like, hang on a minute, these people don't have any belief in anything from what I can gather. And I started questioning them a little bit around that, but there was a belief in a God, but they didn't really understand any of that. They weren't interested in that, but they lived very much with nature, and that was their God. So for me, that was beautiful. But it allowed me to be able to find me in my belief, my own belief system. And school for me was definitely that place where I questioned a lot of the information as well that they were handing over to us. And one of the biggest things I couldn't get was the system. It was like, I don't feel like I fit any of this. And that was really difficult. And looking through my bloodlines and trying to work out what, Māori, Pākehā type stuff and all of the things and trying to fit myself in somewhere. But really the most that really just was forever clear with me was that I was spirit, and that was where I was clear. Nothing else really mattered. And all of the information coming through for me when I was younger too, but I didn't have anyone I could talk to about it or anything like that. So it was always just that world and this world too, and the merging of both of that, but trying to keep this one shut up for a minute while I try and pretend like I'm normal here. Because, oh my God, because I came in years before you, like 58, I was born. So it was very, God, bash your head against a brick wall type stuff then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really, I did keep a lot of it quiet, but then everyone just knew anyway, apparently. So that was really weird. Thought I was doing a really good job of hiding it all.
Yeah, I know. It's
It's,
funny,
it's
like
just,
everyone's like, oh yeah, of course you are. Like, when you say what your job
yeah,
is, like an intuitive or something, they're like, oh, of course you are. You're always going to do something.
yeah. It's funny, yeah, you don't know that people see you because you just don't. But one things I tell you that has been all through my life and questioning um, was how everyone made someone special. Right. So, I just love that person. Oh my God, that's just and I would think, often I'd think, why do you just single that one person out or those few people? Why is that feeling not about everything and everyone? That used to really, I questioned that so much. And I mean, I get it, but yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah.
I saw the
No,
segregation and sense of loving. Mm.
yeah, and I think that obviously, it shows that kind of a higher connection or higher mind connection that, loving I mean, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? As you work through sort of
Yeah.
stages of our consciousness and our evolution, it's to have a really beautiful love that emanates out to everything and realizing that
Mm.
we're connected to the all, and which, a lot of people know in theory, but once you experience it, really
Yes.
experience it, it's deep and it's profound, and that, things really click in that moment.
Yeah.
And I understand, like, I remember, that because I had that similar question too. So it's interesting that you brought it up. Why do we structure ourselves this way? Like, even family systems, or why do we love something so much?
Mm.
I clearly remember, this is one of the, I don't speak very nicely about it, but this is where I think humans are really dumb and really stupid. When we were children, I could not understand role playing. These days, if I was a child, I'd probably get labeled as something like an autistic or something like that, because I just did not get role playing or traditional children's games. I didn't understand why you would fall in love with a stuffed toy. Like, I was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
out of all the things that emanate vitality and consciousness and living essence, there's so much more things around you than a stuffed toy. And I'm not saying that stuffed
True.
toys, don't have a consciousness, but when you're talking about, you've got animals, you've got trees, you've got plants, you've got
Mm.
people, you've got rocks, you've got other things that kind of have a little bit more vitality to them than
Mm.
a polystyrene, like a polyfilled, stuffed toy. So I never quite understood that. And I remember when I was at kindergarten, just thinking this is weird, like it's so dumbed down, like the kindergarten just seemed really dumbed down. And then I'd take myself off to school, and I remember in the field, my teacher saying once to my mum, oh, she doesn't really make friends easily. And my mum asked me about this, and I said, yeah, but I just don't relate. I don't understand how I'm meant to be role playing with Care Bears And like, why? Like, why does everyone have to play through a toy? Like, why can't we just play through us? You know, like just actually talk. Like, why does it have to be like putting on a voice and moving a Care Bear around and that kind of
Puppets.
thing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and my mum would be like, well, when you role play, that teaches you how to do things when you're an adult, like how to interact. And, you know, you play games like hospitals or families or things like that. I'm like, really? We need stuffed toys to teach us how to like role
Yeah.
play? You know, it was just the most bizarre thing. And I never wanted Cabbage Patch dolls or strawberry, what was it, strawberry shortcakes when I was,
Yes. Yes.
and My Little Ponies and things. And I'd be like, well, yeah, My Little Ponies are cute, but why don't you just go in the dimension of looking for unicorns or something? Or, you know, why, and the Strawberry Patch Kids smelt fake, like a terrible fake chemical smell. And
Yes.
the Cabbage Patch dolls are really quite ugly, in my opinion, as a judgmental child. I thought, why would you even like, you know,
I used to think that too. I was like, oh my goodness me, what next? But
yeah.
anyway.
And I know,
Mm,
and I mean, I know Barbie's all really popular, and I'm going to offend people saying this, but
mm,
I remember, you know, because it was really nice that she had some extended family visit, like one Christmas, you know, to see me and my mum, and they brought me a gift, and it was, and I know the intention was good, like really nice behind it, but they gave me a Barbie doll, and I was the rudest kid. I literally ripped the Christmas paper off, saw it was a Barbie, slapped the box on the ground, and threw the Barbie across the room. I was like, what? Like, I was like, what's this thing? Like, I knew even as a 6 or 7 year old that it doesn't look like a real human. It smells like plastic. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I did not see the point.
yes.
Um, and I remember my mum, thankfully, actually gave me 1 year of homeschooling, like from the, at the age of 7, which was around this time of me just not understanding like how to play properly. And it was great because she had a partner at the time who was a medical herbalist, and he was an intuitive, and so, and I knew, well, like he was around in the household from the age, when I was age 3 onwards for a while, for about a decade, and that was great. Because he would travel all around the country doing things like delivering herbs, doing energy healing, doing house clearings. Every Wednesday night he'd hold a meditation circle, you know, 7 p.m.
Mm,
People would turn
yeah.
up. And so I was kind of exposed just to observing this kind of lifestyle. That's what got me, you know, like that, like, I don't want the dolls, I want that life. I want what he
Yeah,
does. Like, that was
totally.
just amazing.
I get that so much. I was the same. And I've never been, I've said to people, don't buy my daughter Barbies. And I steer her, I used to steer them away from Barbie. But I just absolutely, I came on to Love Speaks the other week with Claudia and Bev, and I've just been telling them about this, being in Kmart with my granddaughter and my daughter, and we're in the toy part. She had some money to spend, my granddaughter, and she's 4, so we're in there, and she's trying to choose what she was going to get. And I'm up the aisle with the dolls, and here's Barbie. And oh, well, and then here's Barbie in this box in a wheelchair. And here's Ken in his box in a wheelchair. And
Oh,
I just lost the plot, Gina. I'm sitting in this shop. Honestly, I had to cross my legs. I was laughing so much. I couldn't wrap my head around that. It was like, I get what they're trying to do. I understand all that, but oh my goodness, like actually. And then I was telling Bevan, Claudia, and when we actually came on live as we were all just in fits. We couldn't stop laughing. So I had to explain that away on the program. But that's like I say, I can get it. I get what they're trying to do, but really, is it necessary? Is it really necessary? Can't we
yeah.
just go out, like you say, climb a tree, be out there in that beauty rather than conditioning all that? It's just out there.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and like you say, get the idea behind it, like the inclusivity of it, But if,
Yes.
I home educate my children, and it'd be like, oh, if they don't show interest in this, but if they were to show interest in getting a Barbie doll that's in a wheelchair, I
Yeah.
instead would encourage them to say, I'm really pleased that you're paying attention to this, but let's go and do some service in the community and get to know people,
Yes.
Do something, like actually just get to know people that are in wheelchairs and understand what that life is like. And if
Yes.
they need support, but they might not, because I mean, they can be completely independent people as well. It's just,
Yeah.
but let's go out and just actually learn about it. But I don't, there's very limited skills you're going to gain from playing with a doll that's in that,
Exactly.
but there's more skills to learn, and actually just going out in the community and just enjoying everyone for no matter
Yes,
what kind of physicality they have, what age and stage in life they're at.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah, no, there's so much crazy out there that it cracks me up. Like, so much of it cracks me up today. That certainly did. I know I'm a bit warped like that though. As my oldest daughter said, Mum, you've always had a thing about stuff like that. I said, I know, I'm terrible, but it just is. I just don't get the mentality sometimes.
Yeah,
But you
it's,
know what it is.
it is, and like we all have different lenses, and it's good to have different perspectives, right? And
Mm,
it's an interesting thing too, because one common thing, people go, oh, Gina, you're so just relax on things, like, because I get a bit stuck in my way, and the systems are all a bit broken and stuff. But when it comes to like raising children, it's been interesting observing how I was as a child, or thinking about it, reflecting on it as my children grow up.
yeah,
You
me
know,
too.
yeah, it's
Mm,
there's a lot of, like I say, my children are my spiritual teachers. Like, they have taught me so much, more than any other person on the planet, really, or people on the planet. And you know, in my career and my lifestyle, I'll talk about anything, interdimensionals, galactic spirits that have passed over. I'll happily admit that I'll talk to a rock or a tree. I'm not embarrassed about saying, things like that.
no,
You know,
same. Yeah.
I'll interact with water, and all sorts of things. So no hesitation around that sort of thing. But when people say, "Oh, what, you believe in extraterrestrials or whatever," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not the person that tried to convince my children Santa's real. So take a look at yourself."
Yeah,
You
true.
know, I'm like when I was a child, and I remember being told the fable around Santa Claus, I was like, don't try and pull that one on me. Like, I called it out immediately. And
Did you? I didn't. I didn't. I got sucked in
oh,
by that.
did you?
Probably
Yeah.
wanted a bit of fantasy.
Well, I remember for a while going, oh, okay, they're really, like, my mum really trying to convince me, and a neighbour really trying to convince me with the whole, the pretty tree, and now we have put the milk out and
Probably
everything.
like, will you just believe it, Gina?
I know, they
Make it
really
a lot easier.
Yeah. And they were like, and my neighbour was like, all right, bring her over and make it go. This is the, because I was quite telepathic, right? They didn't say this out loud. It was all a charade, for the child being me. But my neighbour was saying, I could telepathically hear her say to my mum in a private conversation, I'll bring her over, as it starts to go dark, and we'll go sit outside for half an hour, watch the skies. And my neighbour said, I'll go in and ring the bells, and then you say that you see the deer and the Santa Claus flying across the sky. And I was like, really? And so anyway, they did this whole thing, and we did the milk and the cookie, and I had to go sit outside at my neighbour's lawn and watch the sky. And my mum was going, oh my God, do you see Santa and the deer going across the sky? My neighbour was ringing the bells inside, and I was like, oh, are you kidding me? And I was like, and I was staring at the sky, and I was like, no. And I was like, if I stay here long enough, I might see a UFO, but I'm not going to see like Santa Claus. And anyway, it was just amazing, the charades that they went to, and my children. And even though I knew that, I kind of was like, oh, I wonder when I had my children, I was like, should I play along with this game? Because if I don't play along with the game, I'll have a lot of angry parents, because my children will disclose
Yeah.
the fact that it's a false, fake story, and that their parents are lying to them.
Hmm.
So do I go along to keep the peace, or do I just stay authentic and true and tell them the truth? So I thought, oh, look, I'm just not going to say anything. It's just too hard basket for me to try and adult my way through this. So
That's it. That's what I chose too, because it was like, and our parents did the same thing. They
yeah,
probably thought the same thing. Like, really, I don't really want to go along with this, but if she thinks this differently and knows differently, she's going to blow that cover for everyone.
Exactly.
Yes, we would all. Mm.
So I kind of left it. My kids, I think they kind of got it, but slightly unconvinced until they were
Yeah.
about like 3 or 4, and then they were like, but admittedly, they're quite like my son is highly telepathic.
Yes.
He is labeled or was labeled autistic. He didn't really choose to speak a lot till he was 4, but the telepathic communication is very
Yes.
strong. And through that, if I'm not hiding my frequency or my vibration and my thoughts, he reads everything. I can't hide anything from him. So the mere fact that I didn't believe in Santa, he saw through that. Like he was like, oh, like so he figured it out on
Like,
his own. And it's
yeah.
very hard to have very highly intuitive children and pull the wool over their eyes, over
Yes.
these things.
Yeah.
But I kind of brought that up just as a way of like, it interests me a lot with our programming that we have some things we will just continue, like perpetually continue, like the Tooth Fairy
Yeah.
story and the Easter Bunny and the Santa Claus, and we're okay with that. But as soon as it gets into something like believing in extraterrestrials or UFOs or Sasquatches or other things, it's like, oh God, crazy basket. It's like, oh, well, actually, you know.
Exactly.
So,
And I
yeah.
think they have, like if we look at the bunny, the Easter bunny and Santa, there's a softness or a they bring something that's joyful, I suppose.
Yeah.
And like my youngest daughter, she knew that that was always me bringing everything. It wasn't actually Santa, and that was nice actually for her to go along with it, but realize that it actually was me, because I used to think how much glory old Santa gets when, it's us doing all the hard mowing. But in the sense of the extraterrestrial, it's like I think people have definitely that fear that they're going to bring harm.
Mm,
That's really what it is, isn't it? And it shuts them down.
yeah.
But we are those. We are that. We are those from outer space that have come here, if we look at it like that, if that's what we want to call ourselves, we are.
Totally. Yeah, we're all like everyone's got something. Like we're all hybrids of kind of something. We're all a mix of everything. All
Yeah.
had multiple past lives scattered everywhere across the universe,
Yes.
including Earth and other places. And if we weren't programmed a certain way, with how say Christmas programs us and Santa Claus, having a really, a man who's way bigger than a chimney squeeze down it and go ho 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 in your face and deliver. I mean, that could be scary, but we're framed to go, oh no, that's awesome, that's really exciting because he leaves me gifts. So it's all about how we see something, and it's the same with
Absolutely.
extraterrestrials. We can be framed to go, oh, it's scary because it's unknown, or we can go, actually, maybe we need curiosity about it, and it might not be scary. It could be actually quite
Yeah,
blissful. So yeah.
exactly. And look how many children get freaked out sitting on Santa's knee. They don't, he can
Yeah.
be scary to many too,
Yeah.
You hear that? No,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the wind blowing all my stuff off in the kitchen.
Oh, is
Um,
it?
yeah, off the shelf. But yeah, no, it is. It's an interesting time, and I think you will be definitely seeing, as I am, this new world that we're all creating and bringing more of, that just that gorgeousness and still going. All the gorgeousness that's coming in, the men softening, and it's such a beautiful thing to witness. And I love where we're up to in this more oneness space. That's
Mm,
that's what I'm seeing more of. It's beautiful.
yeah.
So, Gina, your quantum energy alchemy. Tell us a bit about that and how you got onto that.
It came through, well, as I mentioned, I had that year of not going to school, and I would travel around with my mother's friend and partner called Walter. And when I was young, I think I was probably around, I don't quite remember the age, but sort of between 3 and 6, he looked at me very directly and said, that girl's going to be an energy healer. And I remember the feeling of when he said that, so
Mm.
clear as day, because there was this real energy that flowed through me and just went, yes, I am. Like every cell in my body just said yes. And
Mm.
although at that age I didn't quite understand it, logistically, like how you go about being one or what that completely means, I just
Yeah.
knew that he saw me, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. So it took me a while to get. I mean, I was always practicing and playing with healing. Like I would travel with him, and at every opportunity when another adult would let me practice healing on them, I would do that with my hands.
Mm.
Um, but at that age, it was more often that I would have animals, to rescue. Like I had a cat who would unfortunately injure birds, but it gave me a chance to practice my healing. So I would always hold the bird, and even though my mum would say, "Oh, don't get your heart set on, healing the bird. It will die of a heart attack, and it's bleeding a lot, and it's, maybe you should, just not put so much time and energy into it," sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would sit there for as long as it took, sometimes hours, still, like just holding it and just being with it and just just really sensing all the energies and merging
Mm.
with it. There was a real sense of merging.
There is yeah.
There is. And, that, so the animals really taught me the very basis of, or the foundations of the energy healing that I later in life went into.
Mm.
By the time I was around, like 2001 is when I first got my first job in an integrated health clinic. It was an osteopath clinic with 14 other health professionals, and I was there as a body therapist and an energy healer. And although my body therapy started as the main draw card, to get people in, I would always do body therapy with the kind of condition that I would do at least 10 minutes of energy healing at the end of every session. And
Beautiful.
my kind of knowing or idea behind that is I wanted to introduce people to it, but also I wanted that to become more of my career eventually, where people would be asking for the energy healing more than the body therapy. Um,
Yeah.
and that transition did happen. The most remarkable thing was that, I mean, I'm glad I did body therapy, because having the touch modality also taught me a lot about the style that I now use as Quantum Energy Alchemy. Although my style is completely and can be completely hands off, there are sometimes points that I like to touch on the body that just really activate, like the energy lines and meridians and things like that. And that part of my career also taught me, like, it was a very clinical practice that I started off with, like all the paperwork and the client histories and all that kind of stuff. And so that first job was from 2001 to 2003. Then I moved to Australia for 11 years. And when I came back 11 years later, people in the area heard that I came back, and like the clients that I used to have started to get in touch. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I did not expect them to remember me, and I hadn't made any contact with anyone. But they'd heard that I was back in Wellington in New Zealand, and if I was doing sessions again. So I sort of started up again. My kids were really young, so I was just doing a little bit. But what became apparent was that as soon as I touched their body, even though I didn't have any of their client history forms from a decade earlier, and to be honest, sometimes I couldn't even quite remember names, but I remembered blueprints and I remembered
Yes.
energy signatures so clearly. And they would get on the table, I'd put my hands on, and what would happen is that all the information from even a decade ago and from all their other lifetimes and their whole being would just come through, and all the information was there instantaneously. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would talk I'm not a huge talker. Like I do my best work in silence, with the
Me
frequencies.
too. Yeah.
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 Um, but if I would talk a little bit, and like they were just so surprised about how much information I remembered from a decade earlier. I'd remember the
Mm.
injuries they would come to me initially to, get pain relief from, or, things they were going through, or their life situation. It would just all come back, and they'd be like, whoa, you remember that from like over a decade ago? And I'm like, yeah, clear as day.
Mm.
It all just came through.
Yeah.
Um, and that just, it really gave me a lot of confidence, and just, I mean, obviously, and this, like, all the information about us is with us all the time. Like, it's within our toroidal field. It can be accessed all the time, and time is not linear, and so it's just there. So if you want to access it, we can, and if you know how to, then you don't really need paperwork, like that's kind of what bores me about the clinical aspect. Is, oh, the paperwork, like, why just touch someone,
Yes.
information, but
Yeah.
so energy alchemy is primarily it's hands-off energy work, and it's really so individual for each person because it depends on what level of consciousness they're dominantly operating at, meaning like I know people can zip zap all over the place from different levels of consciousness and at different levels of spirituality, and some are still in religions, and some, there's different programs, and so everyone's got very different energy signature and structure to the way they receive information into the energy field. And so wherever they're at, I'll just work at that level. But because it's alchemy, the intention behind it is to transmute and transform any densities into something better, because that's what alchemy is. It's a transmutation. So it's slightly different to the, not much, but slightly different to the concept of energy healing, because the word healing can be a little loaded. Sometimes people don't quite fully understand the word healing.
Yeah.
Like when I talk about healing, it's really just about aligning you on your soul path. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be healed in the way you think you're going to be healed.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I have to be really straightforward. I mean, sometimes people get surprised, like if someone's been diagnosed, might be transitioning, they might be, going to the other realm or dying, or they know this, and they might say, well, I want a healing, or someone might book a healing for them. And I'm like, well, I will do the session, but do you realize that it just basically a healing will align you with your soul path? If that means helping you peacefully transition, with that peace and love in your heart, that might happen. It doesn't mean a healing's you're going to live longer. That might not be the outcome for you.
Yeah.
And if you are meant to go through, if you do genuinely need a little bit, when I say need, I mean if you're genuinely meant to experience a little bit of suffering in order to become more humble or get your priorities in order here in this lifetime, there's only so much I can do
Yes.
to catalyze or speed you along to good health, because you still have to learn, there's still an aspect of your consciousness that still needs to experience certain things. And the whole reason why we come to planet Earth is to experience every single emotion that we have available to us, all the way from the lowest vibration of shame, which is just, I mean, you don't want to be in it, but it's part of the experience,
Yeah.
to anger, to grief, to sadness, to anxiety, to worry, to going up to courage, going and then going into more of the expansive frequencies, like the courage, the acceptance, the reasoning, the joy, the peace, the love, the enlightenment. We are here to experience all of it. It is meant to be a bit of a roller coaster. And so there's only, so when we talk about the whole definition of healing, sometimes, I know it's getting better, like the education out there in the community is getting better about what healers do. But just to bust the myths, it's not all like fluffy unicorns and feeling blissful. It's about really having to be
Yeah.
very, really walking through this life with grace. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to experience all of the frequency, all of the emotions, including the lower ones. We just don't want to get stuck in the lower ones. And that's where a healer and an alchemist is really beneficial, because anger is there to be experienced, but you don't get stuck in it, and you don't want it destroying your relationships. So
Yes.
if you've identified within yourself, or the community around you has identified that you're an angry person, and this anger means that you're missing out on opportunities coming your way, or it means that you're destroying things around you, not living the best life you could, then that's when you do need, perhaps some assistance to get tools from someone else, whether that's an energy healer or a breathwork practitioner or another type of
Yes. Yeah.
modality, because you need to learn how to break that state so that you don't get stuck. It's the same with other things like grief. It's good to experience grief and process it, but don't get stuck, because we know that if you get stuck in any type of lower frequency for too long, that's where disease and dysfunction and things like that start to manifest. And when that takes hold of yourself, it becomes more challenging to break out of it. Once you've got a disease, it takes a whole bunch of work to free yourself from it again. So it's always about just having enough awareness of what's going on in your energy field, what densities are you holding on to, having complete acceptance that it's fine to experience all ranges of emotion, but don't get stuck in anything. You know, allow it to process and safely move through it and all this kind of stuff. So I know I'm rattling on a bit, but quantum energy alchemy is really around the transmutation of any of those lower densities within someone's immediate energy field that could be keeping them stuck in something that's not in alignment with their soul path.
Yeah.
And so trying to get them going. But it's not, I really, and quite early on, stepped away of trying to be the fixer and trying to provide the one-stop shop or be the pill that someone takes. I mean, I'm
Yes.
really trying to give people the tools for them to manage themselves. It's like, you know, maybe we at the most might go through 3 to 6 sessions, but if that's not enough to catalyze someone on like getting the momentum in their own life to start really seeing changes, then it's probably not right for them. I mean, you know, there's a little bit of urgency on the planet at the moment. Well, there's a lot of urgency, but you know, there's only so much we can do one-on-one. And I know like my own guides, especially, you know, about between 2 to 4 years ago, really strongly told me to step away from doing one-on-one sessions with people, and I have to start doing groups. And with that transition, partly that's fueled because of the urgency. Like we just need to really get on with elevating the consciousness on this planet. Like however anyone wants to do it, we have to do it. And so I need, you know, I need to do more groups, and that's fine. So I'm, you know, doing sort of ceremonies and groups and things like that. And obviously having an online presence will help. I kind of avoid that a lot, but you know, I don't have a website or anything like that. I do have a YouTube channel now, you know, Centre for Expanding Consciousness. And, you know, with Facebook, I actually got hacked in August, so I lost everything. I've, you know, just kind of restarted one. So I've got very little online presence, but I will start sort of speaking more online now, and it's nice to have this platform with you to kind of speak about it, because as I transition and when I start looking forward to the next 20 years of my life and my mission, my foundational mission has never changed from my birth, which is to always remind humanity that we have all the tools and inner technologies that we need to heal ourselves and heal others and heal the planet. And that's the foundational mission of my whole entire life. So it doesn't matter how amazing AI gets and what kind of quantum technologies we get to heal ourselves and the med beds and all the rest that we talk about. That's not my mission. My mission is solely reminding you and every human that we have our own intelligence, our own inner technologies to do all of this. And, you know, other people have their own missions on the world to do other things. But within that mission, there's levels, and, you know, every couple of years I change what that mission is. And I think we're going to talk at some point about water. That's part of my mission over the next 20 years. But also the next mission is around teaching all sorts of modalities around expanding consciousness, but with 2 other key aspects on top of water, which is going through a very conscious act of dying. Now that I don't want people to go, what, consciously dying? No, it's but having a conscious thought around the dying process at the end of life, and that starts decades before we get there. So partly around my mission is also to discover about how we stop the amnesia that we get when we come through and get rebirthed into planet Earth. Because for me, that slows down our planetary evolution dramatically. You know, if we all have to spend 50 years of our life here remembering who we are, like, that's just too long. It's too long these days to do that. You know, we're at a really critical time. At the moment, I want to say you get 7 years. You know, you get from 0 to 7 to figure yourself out, and then you need to be on path. You know, that's basically what the guides tell me. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, all of that, gosh, yes. And that's basically the sort of work that, well, that is the work that I do as well, in the sense that I don't often put hands on the body. It's almost like you're working all in that space there, but then that occasionally putting hands on is sort of like it anchors it into the body, to the physical. But the I've lost track of where I was heading with that now. With that question, there was a question involved in that as well. But yeah, reminding, I know where I was going. I was doing a reading with a lady and holding space for her, and the children that were coming forward, that were coming in, going, she was going to be birthing in if she chose, were not here for their bloodline. They weren't about their bloodline. It didn't matter what their bloodline was going to be. This was their vessel to come in, but they were more in the evolution, basically. They were fast forwarding, fast tracking, like bringing us into a faster space. Which they weren't here to go through all the cellular memory stuff and all that. They weren't going to hold any of that. It wasn't going to be relevant for them. It was purely them coming in as a highly evolved vessel that was going to it was really exciting, actually. I came away from that like buzzing. It was like, oh my goodness, this is, and it, for me, it was like, this is where we've got to now. We've done this hard yards, like really hard yards. But actually, there's quite a flick. We're in that really big movement now where I feel in this next year, over next year, particularly, we've been in the architectural stages. And then next year, I feel like we're really going to see things take form
Mm.
in what we've been creating in, it's like that. And these children, wow, I was blown away. And then I had this like, are they AI children? Like, are they going to be more that type rather than I did question it afterwards, but the feeling, the energetics in it all when I was actually in it was beautiful. Was
Mm.
like, oh my God, this is showing us how far we've actually come now
Yeah.
in this stage that we've been in. So yeah, it's a very exciting. I just find it very exciting, but it's like the hard work's done for me. That's how it feels now, Gina. It's like there's more willing or open to, sort of take up. But I still get there's still a huge amount that I find and just witnessing. I just take, observe. It's not a judgment, it's just an observation, but it's just those who are still wanting to be told rather than actually actioning.
Mm.
So they still want to go in and get the messages or get the answers from someone else rather than do the work themselves and embody any of that. But again, that's timing too. People come through it in their own time. And I was like that with Christ myself, I'd hear the story of Jesus and the way that it was interpreted and the, and all of that, and like I said, I had no direction in any of that. I didn't know where I was heading, and I knew spiritually what I had around me and what was happening all my childhood. But when I got to understand, because I didn't know the Bible, but I knew the Bible, and I knew that there were certain passages in it that was truth, but most of it wasn't. It was just a man telling a story,
Mm.
or many men. And when I was confronted by Christians or those of any religion around Christ, my answer to them, like when they said, well, what's your relationship with Christ? I said, well, we are that. It was like this freak out, like, because he's on this pedestal, and I saw him as just, this is him showing us what we're all very capable of the same.
Mm.
But they really found like I had the new age demons, and all that. It was that type of stuff, It was just like, wow. But it used to throw me off too, because there's so much of the teaching to go outside of yourself with the Christianity or the religion. It's out there. Everything's out there. You talk to this priest here, or you talk to that, or you pray out there to God. It was never about it being in here. And
Mm.
that took me away for quite a little while. It was like searching, seeking, where is this God? What is that actually? What is that to me? So yeah, it was interesting, the journey, finding those answers for self, because we're getting told this out here, but in here we're getting this other story which felt more right for me, like you with you knew that truth within yourself was what you were getting was your truth. That out there was telling you something completely different and had its own story. and fantasy around what that meant. It's so weird. But we were here to break through those old traditions and, you know, and all of that, which we are doing and we have done, and many of the children today will be brought up very different.
Yeah.
And very much coming back to nature, you know. I grew up in the bush and, you know, going into the bush and sitting with the birds and all of that was my day. I loved it. And was able to do that. Dad would go off and muster sheep and I'd sit down in the bush.
Yeah.
You know, and that was my space. It was beautiful. And I made points of like that's a lot of the time I spent was in that space. It was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, we needed to have that silence though, eh? I'd so needed it. Still do.
Yeah.
Still need to have that quiet space.
And I
Mm,
think there's a real gift. Like if anyone is a parent and they've still got children that are of that kind of schooling age, you know, if you can give them some quiet time, that's,
mm,
you know, there's some of the best things come from that space that we call boredom. You know, some of the best
yeah.
inventions, some of the things that like our planet needs, comes from that space of having nothing else to do other than just sit and be with yourself.
Mm,
You know, whether that's being in nature, you know, with nature, or just being undistracted from all the chit chat in the kind of role playing or the other stuff that's going on. You know, my children are homeschooled and they self-teach themselves. They have space. They did go to school for 6 months when they, you know, were first of age, and they do so much better out of school, but mainly because they've got the space and the time to focus and develop what they want to do in life.
yeah.
um, and they're thriving that way. And I think a lot of children, not saying all, but I'm saying, you know, if a parent recognizes that their children might be better outside of the schooling system or in a different type of system, then perhaps honor that if you can, like if you can find the sort of resources to do that for
Mm,
them, then give them
mm,
that space.
mm.
Because that's kind of like where the evolution part happens for our consciousness. And you're mentioning sort of, you know, we're at different, like everyone's at different levels. Like there's kind of like a substructure of religion. There's another substructure of
Yes.
spirituality. There's another substructure of consciousness. And,
Mm,
you know, religion all around the world, it's usually the common thread is idealizing something outside of yourself externally,
yes. Mm,
whether it's one god or many gods, but it's usually something external to yourself most
mm,
of the time. And then you go into spirituality, which is where it comes back. Like the idea is, you know, it comes back, the source is within you. And then once you've kind of got through that and you start to experience and understand truly, like, yes, you are source itself and the light is within you, and
mm,
you know, you access that, then you start to really expand go into the next substructure beyond spirituality, which is the consciousness, and understanding that, yeah, like you mentioned earlier on, that you love everything and you are connected to absolutely everything. And
mm.
there's kind of, you start to almost lose words and have no need for the words that
No.
are very common in the spirituality substructure. I love spirituality and totally in it, but there are still a lot of labels and polarity. You know, there's still the evil
Totally.
and the heaven, and you know, the hell and the heaven. Like, there's still
Mm,
good versus evil and the dark and the
yep.
light. You know, there's still that. But once you
There it
get
is.
into the consciousness, that's becomes it dissolves away. So it
Yeah.
really does become the oneness and the unity. And yeah, so
Yeah.
we're transitioning into that higher consciousness, like slowly but surely, and it's changing faster. And like you say, the children coming in are going to get there way more rapidly than what we did.
Mm, yeah.
And thank goodness. So,
I reckon too. And I think, yeah, I do. It's a funny thing. I don't see the cycling anymore. Like, like we're talking about coming back in again and having amnesia, and I just don't feel like that's the cycle anymore either. I feel
no,
we're somehow breaking through that where we're not actually in that cycle. There's I I don't know. I know the physical form can't keep living forever, but I believe it can also. If we are in that right aligned, there's no illness or disease. Like we're stepping out of that cycle of death. we've been in death, and now we're stepping out of the cycle of death and coming into life.
Yeah.
You know, we're actually bringing life into the form now, rather than in that death cycle of separation and all that stuff there, which created disease and death. You know, the deterioration of. And now that, for me, that is just so far over there.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's like, I feel like I could live for 200 years, and
Totally. Yeah.
that thing, it's like we're really bringing life back into the form, and it's starting to function how it was supposed to function. We've been right round. We've come into that space now where we've corrected it all, or are still. But I believe we have. I believe we've done it. We're just now, it'll start showing up soon. That's what I believe. It's coming
Yeah,
into
I'm
form
totally
more.
with you on that. And I get it and I see it in my own like sort of career work life, but in my personal life, like sort of I was touching on a little bit about the next sort of like 20 years and beyond for me as I transition into sort of different ways of working. But, part of the self-experimentation, and I know some people won't get this, but it's also around becoming a free energy cell myself. Um,
Yes.
so, and a label for that could be a breatharian. It's really about just understanding to use the life force energy as the fuel that I need to sustain myself.
Mm.
Um, you know, I want to say that food and water that we consume is a part of a program, and most of the problems that we have in this entire planet is around food and water. If you
Exactly.
take away the need for us to consume that, we don't need, like, we fix so much instantly. Um,
Mm.
but so you can let your mind wander about, oh yeah, what if I don't need the transportation systems to transport food, and I don't need the agriculture, I don't need to change the land in this way and that to grow the food, and I don't need to struggle to try and find clean water because I don't need to rely on water as much as I used to. And if you just start thinking about, oh, what if I was a being that didn't need to have as much food or any food, you could just imagine how the entire planet would change it over,
That, exactly. And
and
we become free energy.
we do, and we become free energy, and it's certainly possible. And I believe, I want to do that. And it's not in a way of like, oh, I'm having a food issue, like I'm not eating or something like that.
No, no,
I
no.
love the taste of food, right?
Yeah.
But there's something, a real drive, a real inner knowing and mission that I need to try and overcome that programming as best I can in this
Yeah.
lifetime because it's part of our consciousness evolution. And when we talk about this desire to have free energy, as in electricity, that
Mm.
Nikola Tesla, sort of invented, and we've missed out on a whole century of that kind of evolution. But, we talk about
Yeah.
that. Many people talk about the desire to have free energy and how would that transform the world if we all had free electricity and,
Mm.
we weren't sort of slaves to that kind of system and that all that kind of thing. But if we think, well, we need to have the consciousness to be ready for that, and I believe part of the consciousness that invites free energy to be here in a really sustainable, safe way for humanity is also understanding that our bodies are free energy, which is part in understanding you don't need so much food. Like you need
That's
to
right.
bring more source light energy into us to
Mm.
sustain you. And when you
Mm.
have more light in you and you become more of what a free energy vessel is, we will also instantly manifest everything we need to hold free energy on earth. Now we
Yeah.
know that free energy in terms of electricity has been around, like mentioned, over a century, but we can't hold it here. It keeps
Mm.
disappearing somehow, right? Through dark agendas. But if we want to hold it here, our consciousness needs to be at a level to hold it here. So
Exactly that. And that's the movement, eh? That's what I see happening. And it'll just be one day we'll be in that, you know, no problem. And I
yeah,
know, when you go into that deep state of consciousness, and it is just that, where you're in, people, meditation say, and you're in that very deep state of just pure consciousness. There's no form, you can't feel the body, you're purely that breath and consciousness. You aren't even breathing. Like, I can go into state, and I know there was a guy that was found in a cave, a guru type. dude, he'd been there for years and years and years and years and years, and they thought he was dead, but he wasn't actually dead. He was in a deep state of meditation. And I get that. I've been there many times and I love that space. You honestly, even though my mind's active in there, there's a thought that I have that how can my body is just absolutely functioning and still alive without that big breath that I'm always taking. It's just a beautiful space to be. I love it. But yeah, we're definitely changing things, definitely doing that. It's like I say, exciting. I'm so excited.
Yeah, same. I feel so, like you say, excited about being on this planet, and yeah, despite having complete awareness of all the things that are uncomfortable on this planet and dark,
Mm,
if we want to categorize it that way, I'm not naive to any of it, but my curiosity and my mission and the love that I have for this planet Earth is just, it outstrips any of that. And I
yeah,
think when you
same.
live with purpose,
Mm,
you know what to do. You just see the beauty everywhere and create your own
you
own
do.
bubble.
And it's I think for many now, we've had that journey. We might have come in at that and we've been that most of our life, but obviously there's lots of stuff we had to go through and bring forward for us to move out of. And now I feel like there's more and more in the space that I can feel myself in where I've come back to that now. And I'm back in absorbing more of me and nature and the all again and the oneness. And it's a
Mm.
beautiful space. Well, thank you, Gina, for coming in. This has been a wonderful chat. And yes, we are going to have a chat again as well with my other podcast, Shoot the Breeze. And we're going to talk about your water journey and what you're doing with all of that. So that will be exciting for everyone as well to get to know you more on that scale. But it's been really lovely to find out a bit more about you and how you grew up and what your life, how you've molded your life. Really, it wasn't actually molding you, was it? It's like you were moving it, and I think that was something. I look back now and I see the same thing with myself, and I know at times it was very difficult, but we knew who we were. Really,
Mm.
just knew who we were. And nobody was going to change that. We
That,
might have moved it a wee bit because we had to fit in at some point, and those fears probably made us do that a wee bit, fear of, standing out too much or, yeah, we didn't want too much, coming at us, did we? We wanted to sort of blend a wee bit, but I know there was, I never felt like I fitted. That was for sure.
that's right. I think there's always a little bit of that flying under the radar, but always knowing there was a time and purpose and
Mm,
reason for being here at the same time. So,
yeah.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Beautiful. Oh, so welcome. It's been beautiful we chatting.
Yep.
And yeah, thank you, thank you. My
Thank
head's
you.
going. It's like there's lots of conversations still to have, really, but we need to get on. But
Yeah.
anyway, much, much love to you and your family. And that background, I keep zoning into that as well. It's beautiful. It's a
Oh, the
beautiful
beautiful
space you're in.
ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah, it's
All
great.
right. Well, much love and thank you again.
Thank you. Namaste.
No, bye-bye.